All right. We don't even edit these out. We just live stream it all. So we're recording right
One,
now.
one shot, one kill. Got you. Okay.
One shot, one kill. Let's do this. No editing here, right?
Right.
Um, so, welcome, Vivek, to our weekly webinar where anybody and everybody can join in and listen in, ask us any question, get some feedback, get their curiosity met. Um, Welcome to our weekly webinar. And I know you've listened in previously, so this should be easy breezy for you, right?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me over. And I've always looking out for those webinars online, right, and different forums and networks because I think it's inevitable in this day and age. Because a lot of content out there, and especially myself, as a lifelong learner, I'm always into listening to different talks and webinars.
Yeah, yeah,
For the same reasons.
yeah. And your interest is definitely aligns with everything we're talking about. And sometimes it just feels like in my bubble, I will say something that is already outdated. Like, oh, it's been 6 months since we had that cool thing come out, but we don't care that about it anymore. We don't care about that 6 months old technology anymore. We found something better. Um, and you are in the midst of all of this AI machine learning evolution. You're learning it all. So I think you have to contribute to a level to stop me and say, hey, that's not old news.
100%. I mean, to your point, right? I'm actually culminating on a graduate degree program, yeah, in data science and/or machine learning, right?
Yeah.
Actually, taking a course as we speak on it on the topic of machine learning, and like I said, I've been doing this for a couple of years. But of course, I do have a long established background in information security, which has a lot of parallel with data science and ML.
Oh yeah. I mean, what is that called? Like there's a meme out there where this guy is wearing a sheep skin.
Yep,
Every time he changes it, it's either data science or AI machine learning or algorithm, or it's just wherever
exactly.
circle he's in, he wears a different skin ship. It's just all labeled differently. It's all it is data matrix manipulation, right? That's the original concept, and well, you know, we don't want to call it that because that sounds pretty bad. You know, artificial intelligence that will never get old, right?
Same.
One of the things that I've been saying recently is that if you don't want it to work, call it an AI.
Yeah. I mean, the old adage of computers, right? GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. So at the end of the day, it's a piece of hardware that processes data. So no
That's
matter how
right.
you look at it, it's what you put in and what you get out. Yeah,
Yeah, because you have to know the intricacies, what it is that you want out of AI machine learning, right? If you want the garbage, call it an AI. But if you want something solid, you have to dive in beyond AI.
yeah.
I mean, I'll go to the next slide.
Go
Call it artificial intelligence, half of the time it won't work. But call it
right.
machine learning, you know exactly how it's supposed to work, and that's the only
Exactly.
thing it will do is provide you with whatever's you're intending for it to come out with.
Right.
Uh, but when you call it artificial intelligence, you get better audience. People listen more, right?
I understand.
Machine learning, on the other hand, yeah, like what are you saying? Machine, like what's a machine here? Uh,
I think to your point, the caveat, right? I mean, yeah, it's all end of the day, it's all about modeling, right? You're trying to model that system, that black box. Hey, what can if I put in this, can I expect that? Or
right,
that's the idea of machine, as in your computers or your distributed computing, right? That's
right,
your machine. But
right. And
yeah,
and if you're able to uh, understand the intricacies that are going on behind the scene, that's just a formal education, like a few minutes of just understanding that. But if you're able to say, what are the use cases? How does the business logic apply to
right.
this piece here, and how does this improve over time? And not just competition aspect of it, right? Not that
Understand.
the competitors are going about it as you're trying to invest time and money into this topic. Um, how does your internal users, as in your employees, feel about how fast or how slow you're moving with AI machine learning, right? How are you innovating large language model? How are you innovating for that medical diagnosis that you've been doing manually for so long, right? What are some of the questions that your internal employees are asking because they can see how the competitors are moving forward, right? So if you have the use cases for your business logic, how do you align that business logic with the use case and then use case to an artificial intelligence, which everybody can agree on
Exactly.
at one point or another that, hey, it is artificial intelligence because it's functioning with an intelligence beyond logic, right?
Right.
Because it's able to mimic what a human intelligence can do. Um, so it's important that we understand the intricacies, but for the right reasons and right purposes. But the use cases are very important to communicate those use cases. Um, the reason I say, like, if you want to do it wrong, call it an AI. But if you want to get it right, name it correctly, right? Label it correctly, so that way you actually get what it is you're asking for. Um, a lot of the companies calls for AI, and next thing you know, they're not getting what they asked for.
100%. Right. I mean, you're talking about, like I said, the three biggest facets of any organization is your people, processes, and technology, right? Your people is the biggest assets, right? People is the biggest assets,
Yeah.
bar none. But then, if your processes and technologies are not lined up to whether people want to use it, you're
Right.
going to lose people
Right.
real fast.
Are you done with PPT? Yeah, I'm done with
I
PPT.
like the pun. PowerPoint presentation. Now, that
Um, so I think the reason we are in this webinar today is because uh, Ian Bremmer put out his TED Talk the other day, has garnered lots of view, and I've been a fan of Ian Bremmer for very early on. I'm a student of conflict resolution, so he's the CEO of Eurasia group, where he's pretty much focused on Russia and Ukraine way before anybody was focused on Russia and Ukraine. That's an important piece. But what he discussed on this topic, this TED Talk, is that my favorite topic always has been like nature versus nurture, right? Which one comes in? Like, how do you understand that from legal frame of work? What's nature and what's nurture, and what impacts a person to do crime, and what impacts a society when it comes to nature versus nurture? What's society's responsibility in nurturing a person from not committing crimes, right? So had a huge discussions around this topic. But the other day, as I'm watching him talking on the TED Talk, he goes into the fact that yeah, it used to be nature and nurture, but now it's algorithm. And that I said, wow, we need to say that more often because that's beautiful, right? Nature, nurture, and then you got algorithms. Because what used to help people grow up is nature and nurture. Now people will grow up through algorithms. And if we don't know that the algorithm is what's growing us up, like raising us and helping us to develop our mentality, right? It's a dangerous equation that we don't want to go down that path, right?
right.
We want to be able to say, yeah, I'm more like a nature versus nurtured, but do I know that I'm being nurtured and being complying to a algorithm, right? you know,
Are you sticking by the rules? Actually, it's funny you say that. It's kind of interesting because it's the same analogy, right? When you think security, what's the first thing that comes to my mind? Everybody's mind. Oh, yeah, security. Let's secure the thing. Let's lock the door or whatever it may be, right? In any context. No, it's security should be an enabler for your business objectives, not a not a hindrance. So the same exact analogy. Nature was a nurture.
and you can build a castle, but you will never have a fun if you cannot leave that castle, right?
Exactly.
And you
Right.
can build a castle only so high that at one point or another you got to stop, right? Or you got to start digging downward and say like, well, this is the best way to defend myself. Well, that defeats the whole purpose of whatever the hell you built that castle for. Nobody goes in and nobody comes out,
That's the
right?
old Trojan horse analogy, right? Yep.
So Ian Bremmer talked about nature versus nurture and then algorithm, and then he moved into a little bit about semiconductor chips, which I thought was just an appropriate timing because to
Right.
talk about semiconductor chips, this is the time to talk about semiconductor chips, and we'll definitely have a guest coming in next week who specializes in semiconductor chips designing. We'll go into the terminology of semiconductor chips, why that's important, how that gateway captures all the data. We'll go a little bit more into that, right? But I figured this conversation is about that algorithm. But this conversation is to talk about the fact that there's data component, the data that is traveling, how that data is at rest, how that data is in motion, and how that data is being utilized, right? That user experience that we have right now, and how that data in motion will change that user experience is very important to understand as well. Um, Trying to cover a full ecosystem in 2 webinar,
Right.
which we do very poorly, I would say, because we need to have like a maybe day and a half worth of conversation just to take one of those topics. But poorly, very poorly, within 45 minutes, we try to cover a full ecosystem for no
Exactly.
apparent reasons. But it gets people thinking, it gets people going. If you learn anything from here, feel free to drop that into the chat. Ask your questions on the comment section there. Ask us anything, right? If we are able to answer that right on the spot, we will. If not, we will definitely get back to you, right? Inbox it to you and say, hey, this might be the way to think about it. Not that we'll be able to give you all the solutions, but we can actually guide you somewhere, right? Uh, Never misguide, just guide. So yeah, Vivek, like we're talking about data at rest, data in motions, and data in use. What's your thought on that user experience side of things? Where do you see us going in the future? I know we are about to get into some data topic, but like, let's prep the users. Where are we today, and where do you see us going in the future?
Oh, that's a great question, right? And definitely, as you already know, data is exploding, right? I think the acronym is the 5 V's, right? Velocity, veracity, volume. I forget the other two top of my head, but there is 5 different dimensions of data. In the sense, it's increasing. I mean, look at your IoTs, right? You got devices all over connected to the internet, right? And everything that's touching the internet is a data source, right? And a data consumer. So inevitably, you're going to have a lot of data, and the cloud. At some point, it may not be sufficient, so to speak. You may need a bunch of clouds.
Oh,
If you can put the S after a cloud, right? Because the cloud itself doesn't have a sort of like a dimension, if you will, right?
yeah, yeah.
It's
I think what happens after the cloud fills up. You go to the atmosphere,
exactly.
and you have
I
seven
get.
layers of atmosphere.
I like the way you said that. That's right. I mean, there's
But we
no.
don't have enough cloud to hold those data. Let's move into the atmosphere, actually.
Yep.
So I just went through like 3 slides here where we're just showing like the concentration of all the data centers around the country. And if you
Exactly.
just
Heat
focus
map.
into this part, why do we have a lot in Virginia is a good question to ask. Like why is Virginia so hot with all the data centers being utilized there? I want the listeners to start thinking about it from the perspective of data in motion, right? The
Correct.
data in motion is what allows you to have the user experience, that data in use, the user experience. Because data at rest is just a data at rest, but data in motion creates that user experience at the end device, right? So wherever that data is traveling from, at the end when you receive it, how you received and how fast you
Yep.
received it will qualify you for the good user experience or a bad user experience, right? So here's one of the reasons you have most of the data centers located in the East Coast in Virginia, right? It's because it has lots of population right near it, right? So you can within driving distance, you have majority of the U.S. population living right there, and Virginia just happens to be right in the dead smack middle of it, right?
Right.
Other part of it, there's lots of power consumption, lots of water consumptions. These data centers are very hungry with everything that you have in your home, but it needs more of that in the data center. So you are sharing lots of your energy and lots of your water usage for those data centers. So that being said, companies like all the ones that you can name, they're big ones. They're all located in Virginia, right? So they're close by, not only just the DC, but where the data is stored and where data is traveling from, right? Um, Pick up and drop off, right? If you pick it up from the data centers and the drop off point is nearby, you're going to have faster access to this data, right? So we talked about DC, so good transition here. Ian Bremmer, he mentioned that the semiconductor chips, the geopolitics of semiconductor chips, and how the semiconductor chips are getting blocked off from being utilized in Chinese manufacturing. They want to bring the manufacturing home, and how do you do that? By having White House come up with Chips Act for America. Excuse me, what am I saying? Chips for America Act. That's
Yes.
literally what CHIPS is. Chips for America Act. that's how you initiate. That's how you initiate the fact that, well, we've been manufacturing these chips overseas for so long. Now we will manufacture them at home. And the reason not being, right? Reason
Right.
not being is China. But if you think about it, it is just a logical thing to have all your supply chain
Exactly.
within few miles of driving, right? So let's
Right.
say, for example, if you design your semiconductor chips out in Virginia, and you can drive out to Utah to pick it up, right, without traveling the ocean, right,
Right.
without worrying ports that will allow your ships to come to their ports or not, right? Any taxes that are included into that piece, right? If it's built in Arizona, you just go and pick it up, right? Drive your Prius all the way from Virginia to Arizona if you like, and load it up on back of your truck or back of your Prius. Those are all possibilities, right? But the way it's happening, the supply chain, the first and last mile of that logistics, we
Yep.
want to be able to capture that, right? Say not only design it in house, and there's less chance of it being stolen for other purposes. We can also manufacture it within a certain range where we are able to go pick that up whenever we need, right? Instead of waiting it for to clear customs, right? Um, so there's a whole lot of activities that are happening, and I want people to be aware of that, right? That CHIPS Act is something that Ian Bremmer mentioned through semiconductor chips piece. But if you think about CHIPS Act, that's super important because that brings the manufacturing back to all 50 states, right? Because if you're manufacturing the chips here, every device that will be manufactured by those chips, for those chips, using those chips, will all center around all the manufacturing that are coming back to the United States,
Yep.
right? So it's a very important topic that we focus on because this is just not happening in the United States. It's happening all across Europe, all across Asia, where India is picking up their own semiconductor chips business. Germany is trying to ramp up their semiconductor chips business, of course, just like US. There are lots of uh, moving pieces for the semiconductor chips industry, so which you might not see within next few years, but you will definitely see the impact of it in 5 to 10 years because that's how long it takes to ramp up a production of semiconductor chips in any condition, right? Being that even with the right condition, it might take 2 to 3 years, right? In a worse condition, it might take 10.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a lot to
Parts
it.
of
I mean,
the supply chain.
there's a lot of. I mean, like you said, you're talking about millions and millions of transistors on a single cell phone. So imagine the amount of effort it takes to put those in and all the bells and whistles. Yeah, it's definitely a huge effort. And like you said, it's more of a strategic plan, right, than a short term operational plan, if you will, right? Uh,
Yeah, I think uh, how they're going about it, they're already asking for more money.
exactly.
52 billion was like a drop in a bucket, right? And it's
100%.
cool, but we need more, right? Because other countries are pursuing it in not only for national interest purposes, but if you control semiconductor chips, you control all the manufacturing, right?
Pretty
So one of the
much.
things that we just recently did that Ian Bremmer mentioned is that we banned China from having semiconductor chips produced by our allied nations, right? So Japan not only said like not only will we comply with the U.S., but we might actually go even further than that.
Yep.
Not even sell you the old chips. Not only am I not going to sell you the new chips, but I'm not going to even sell you the old chips, right? You're on your own, right? So this beef, this fight is ramping up, right? This geopolitical fight is ramping up, and uh, there's what you see in front of you is a breakdown of some of these chips act where the investment is happening. But if you think about it, me and Vivek, we're both military guys, right? We have association with military. So what we like to say is that if you're a military guy listening to this podcast, because I have lots of military guys that are in my network, if you're listening, right, here's a chance for you to look into the semiconductor chips industry as you're thinking of getting out of military and transitioning out of military and get into something that will impact not only just national security, but the status of economy and finance and just a society in general, how that will be impacted is in semiconductor chips industry, right? It's a gateway into all things that are coming down the pipeline. Um, so as you can see, like I think this slide here has, yeah, $200 million for workforce development by NSF,
Ooh-wee.
right? $200 million. So we got to find out where that $200 million is going, and who's educating the workforce, and how are the workforce learning and applying that knowledge into the development of semiconductor chips. Because the first problem we have is that most of the semiconductor chips designer, developer, and subject matter experts are in their age of retirement, and we don't have enough new bloods coming in uh, to retain those subject matter expertise, keep those knowledge within the shop floor, right? We need to have that happen really, really fast. So it's important, not only military veterans, guys that are in active duty, or veterans that are looking for better jobs. We need actually more than that. We need everybody to say, yeah, this is the future, and I got to go through that 4 years of school, if not 4 months of certification, whatever the case is. I got to get involved today, and I think that's a very important steps towards the future. You know.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, this is the same. You're drawing the same parallels in security, right? When you're talking the realm of security, you can either take that 4-year college course, invest your time in, or you can take these pretty, let's say, not necessarily super easy, but not necessarily as daunting, well-known certifications like your CISSP or your CISM, and same thing. They have the same weight.
Yeah, yeah. There's these things that are coming down the pipeline. We just want to bring that up to the surface for you to you to pay attention to, right? If you're benefiting from this webinar, from this discussion, uh, drop any comments you have on the chat. Let us know. What's your comment? What's your question? What are you curious about? What it is that we can do to help? We'll try to get in front of that question and answer as soon as possible. But the conversations that we're starting here right now, it started off of Ian Bremmer's TED Talk, where he mentions that nature versus nurture, nature and nurture, but now add algorithms to it. I think that's important, right? But the algorithm conversation is so wide. AI machine learning conversation is so wide. Um, we have to focus on a specific topic. So that's the reason we'll talk a little bit more about data and how the data travels, and what are the contribution of semiconductor chips in that, right? So if you're interested in data in motion, but you're also interested in other topics, right? Put that in the comment. Let us know, like, hey, Ian Bremmer did a great presentation. I love it, but he covered so many topics, but I'm interested in this piece exactly, right? So we just talked about semiconductor chips, and Ian Bremmer doesn't really mention data in motion. But if you think about data in motion, why is that important for semiconductor chips is what we're going to get into next.
Absolutely. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.
Yeah, exactly. Like, subscribe, and share. Share as in tell it to the people that wants to know this information, right? Even if you are passing by, just stop by and say, hey, you know what? Somebody else might appreciate this information actually. So please do share. For most of the users, our data experience, the one of the user experiences on a daily basis on a device, right? Be it that small phone or a laptop or a big computer, whatever you have at home. But that's not where it all stops, right? You have IoT devices at home. Your fridge is connected to the internet. Your washers and dryers are connected to the internet. Your smartphone. Things goes on. Your ring cameras. Even most people don't have IoT devices at home. They at minimum has some sort of ring camera that is IoT device. And quick fact, if you have a ring camera that is really, really cheap, you want to make sure that IoT device is not sending information into China.
Right. or to your point, any adversary, right?
Yes, any person. Why is that data traveling there? Like, I don't like that. But you have so many IoT devices at home. How do you know which one is sending information to where? It's very hard to detect. But that's just a broad spectrum of where the data is coming into play, as in what you see as a user, what you use as a user, you have to understand where that data is heading to and where's that data coming from, right? So there's a whole lot of data in motion. And the point being is that semiconductor chips is what makes that data get to your house, get to your device, or from your device goes to wherever it's going. And it uses a tunnel, of course, right? The wires, right? That Wi-Fi. Even if it's Wi-Fi, it's connected to another wire at the end, right? And that wire is the tunnel where the information is traveling through. So it's sort of like a subway, right? You have your destination, you get on one station, you get off on the other, and then once you're done, you get on the subway again, and you go back to wherever you came from, or you just go back to the next station, or you travel somewhere else, right? It's that process of what information is being used in your device, and through semiconductor chips, it will travel in a lightning speed, right? So if you can imagine this conversation me and Vivek is having right now, it's not necessarily ending up in Vivek's device as we speak. It's actually being processed somewhere in the middle in a data server, and that data server is pushing that information into Vivek's device as well. So there's a pit stop somewhere. And the reason it's lightning fast is because of the semiconductor chips, right? These semiconductor chips are not a joke. And when I mean not a joke, like you cannot even see the transistors inside of the semiconductor chips. They are to the level that they will be 5 atoms wide sooner or later. They're about 15 atoms wide at this point. So when I mean you cannot see them, I literally mean you cannot see these transistors. They're lightning fast. And where they are right now today, because of the surface area that they require and the power that they consume, and because of the power consumption, how they heat up and perform less because of the heat, it's something that's very concerning. So not only are they having horizontal chips, now they're having vertical chips. So they're building chips on top of chips in order to make it process that much more information, that much more faster, and do it with high efficiency with least amount of data being lost. And data in transition, data in motion, where the data gets lost is a big issue, but you don't feel that as a user because your user experience from AOL days versus current day is totally different, right? So these servers are a critical component. The data centers are a critical component in how your data travels. What happens to your data in these data centers is very important because if they're not safe, if they're not secure, if they're being compromised somehow, the integrity of data is being messed with, right? There's lots of complexity that you have to understand. But if you understand data in motion and how that plays that role of how secure your data is, how much integrity does your data have, right? How fast can you recall those data, right? So that data center topics that we went through earlier is because these data centers are what's feeding most of your user experience through a semiconductor chips. So layers of intricacies, but if you understand it from the semiconductor chips perspective, now you can say, wow, what's coming down the pipeline in coming years? As in, what if my data no longer have to travel through the tunnel into a data server? What if my data was being processed within my laptop?
And that's a huge
I'll
point.
leave you at that.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot in terms of like you're 100% right. These clusters are getting bigger and bigger, and they can only grow so wide. They have to eventually grow vertical, right? You can't scale horizontally at some point, and you hit the nail on the head with respect to how small these transistors are getting by the day. Moore's law, right? At some point, has always been true to itself.
Yeah, I think there's a part that's where we have to reinvent the semiconductor chips all over again. They're shrinking in size, and I think yeah, we can jump in a little bit because I think we're going fast enough. Like I said, we're covering the whole ecosystem in less than 45 minutes, so you're welcome. But yeah, you got your ecosystem that if you understand your semiconductor chips, you will understand the function of your data, right? How fast these data are being processed. So one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that if you are able to do AI machine learning within a device, and your data is no longer traveling, having to worry about that data in motion, type of services that you will get in coming years from these semiconductor chips. By the way, it could be a digital or an analog type of chips, which It's something you want to look it up and find out how they work. But these analog chips that are coming into the market right now to help with these digital chips to function and properly produce data and have those data have high accuracy and most confidence is something that you have to start thinking about. What you're designing today might not require data in motion traveling all the way to, say, data center in Virginia, right? I'm in Texas, you're in Texas, but doesn't necessarily mean that our data will have to travel that far and come back to us, right? That latency is what causes a lot of your user experience to degrade over time, right? Um, and depending on what sort of data that is being processed and how and what chips are being used to process this data, it's what's going to dictate your user experience. So when you have GPUs versus CPUs, you might come down to two different experiences, right? So you have to be really careful about how you're design, what you're designing, and as you're designing, do you keep that feature in mind where you might not need that data center anymore. You might do the processing right on your hardware, which is right in front of you behind your keyboard.
That's that power versus speed trade-off, right? I mean, to your point, right? The smaller you get, you're gonna have more heat come out. Your tolerance for heat is going to reduce too. Your surface area reduces, right?
That's
Physics
right.
101. And to your point, data sovereignty, right? How close the closer the data is to point of use, the better it is.
Yeah, because there's lots of concerns with data privacy, and a lot of the solutions that they're offering with blockchain to say, like, how do you privatize your data and how do you monetize your
Right.
data? So every time somebody has to use it, you have to opt in for them to use it and pay you a cent every time they use your data because
Yep.
you're part of that $1 billion that they will make, and they will share the revenue of that $1 billion with you, right? Um, so ultimately, that could be a solution that not only is your data being processed internally within your hardware, you don't even have to opt in because nobody's able to steal that data unless they break into your device, right?
Right.
And for them to break into your devices, to your data, it has to be worth at least more than $100, right? Now, so you got multiple levels of chips, and these chips are coming down the market very fast. And as you can imagine, everybody's in the race. You got Intel, Samsung, TSMC, Qualcomm, Texas Instrument, north of Dallas here, right? Micron and AMD. Those are just some of them, right? Some of them are U.S. friendly, and you have some of them are not so U.S. friendly, right? Uh, they're known for stealing IPs and using those IPs to design their own piece and compete in the same market with those stolen IPs. So you have lots of challenges, but the future that we are, or at least I'm envisioning, and with high confidence I'm envisioning, is that these semiconductor chips will definitely change the way we do business, and we have to start designing now because the adaptation through the semiconductor chips will be fast and overnight, right? And one of the things that I want to point out is because I mentioned fast and overnight, is that we see technology evolution as a process that went from, well, it used to be about 20 years. Well, it now turned out to be 10 years. And then 10 years later, we're talking about like, well, it takes 5 months to have an evolution of all the device and all these designing and productionalizing it and having it out in front of the customer, right? It takes a very short amount of time. So we went through that, but we no longer have the luxury of guessing how long it will take for the next product to come around, right? Because these designings are getting ridiculously fast, and the use cases of the adaptation of these semiconductor chips will be rapid, right? Um, I think I did an injustice of having a small picture there, but those are the kind of points I want to make. Is that we went from 90 nm to 3 nm in a very short period of time, right? Um, Actually, that bandwidth of the gate after 30 nm doesn't even make sense.
Exactly.
At that point, after 30 nm, we were counting atoms, right? But right now, we're down to 3 nm, and 3 nm is what Apple is using for their devices, right? So the evolution of these semiconductor chips and how fast they'll be adopted and utilized, it's always a race, and we have no way of telling, is it 24 hours or 24 days that these artificial intelligence like capabilities will come into the market and actually start taking over a product that we thought was to be really cool. And I'm looking at ChatGPT, for example, right? We're like, oh, that was cool. I had to type in stuff. That's whack. Now I talk into it, right?
Yeah.
What's a keyboard? I don't even know what that keyboard is, right? So these kind of capabilities that are coming down the pipeline, I think we have to really focus and understand that where our data is, how this data will travel, and how the data will process is super important to understand. And to keep up with the industry, I think is a failed cause. Like you cannot keep up with the industry, you only can keep up with your customers. And what your
Right.
customer needs is what you have to give them.
Absolutely. I mean, and to your point, right? I mean, the supply chain is going to play a big effect in how this is all going to materialize itself, right? And the idea being that, hey, if that meat goes wrong in the shelf, you want to pull it back as soon as possible. Same deal here. You want to stop the book from going in the wrong direction real quick. Otherwise, it's a lot. And this is another topic coming in the future. It took place near you. Social engineering. The bad guys after your data.
Yeah, it's like I always hear is knocking on my neighbor's door. When is it my turn, right?
Right, exactly.
Because I'm very afraid of social engineering, right? Because you just don't know when you fall for it because it's so real. It's happening in real time. So just the other day, I was looking at an email. It took me definitely more than 10 minutes to say that's not real.
Oh yeah.
They had my name. They had every font in the email correct, except for their A's.
Oh my.
Oh yeah, except for their A's, which I had to Google search. I had to figure out through like all the websites to say like, okay, how do I find out how fake this email is? And it turned out that it was so real. It came down to a point of everything being right, except for the way they typed the A. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
So I think Vivek is having little technical difficulties, but if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to drop it in the chat. We're in our end point of covering the whole ecosystem of semiconductor chips, data in motion, Ian Bremmer, White House chip stack, and everything in the sun and between the earth.
Excuse me. Yeah, I just had a side call I had to put down. Nothing too crazy.
It's all good, man.
All good.
So,
Right. That's what
I think we're in the end stage here, right? Just wanted to, reemphasize what we talked about, right? Why we're talking about this, because we might not have all the coverage of all the topics, but we want to be able to get started, right? We want to be able to start asking the questions, because if you ask all the questions, you will not get all the answers. But if you ask the right question, you might get close to the answer that you need, where you can take action, right? Some information is just knowledge. If you don't do anything with it, it's just knowledge. But if you ask the right question and you start taking actions, I think that's far more important that you ask those type of questions than just any question, right? And this is my way of understanding how to ask the right question. What are the hardwares? Where are the software? And what's the data? If I can understand those three breakdown, I think it leads me in the right path. And first question I always ask is the hardware.
Right.
What can I do without the hardware, right? What can be hardware agnostic, right? And where's the software, and how does the software create the data, and what does it do once it creates those data? Does it have an AI machine learning to complete the full feedback loop, right? Because so far, for the last 30, 50 years, what we've been doing with software is just that, half of the feedback loop. We never completed it. We always had data that is being generated and data that is being stored. And those stored data are not necessarily feeding back into line one of the software, right? It's just collecting this data, but not doing much with this data. What we will have to do is complete that feedback loop by using AI machine learning at the end of that software loop.
And to your point, I mean, the 5Ws, I almost said 5Ws, I see the how to, right? But to your point, this is the same thing. I'm actually studying for my CISA exam, which is the Certified Information Security Auditor examination, which is a pretty certification, if you want. And it's a very, reputable certification for somebody who's in the business of auditing, and that's exactly the business, right? Ask the right questions and know who to ask, when to ask, how to ask. And this is exactly the same thing, because if you don't ask the right questions, you won't get the right feedback, right?
That's
And
right.
and then you're not, to your point, you're not going to close that loop.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think where we are right now. Look, this is the end part of the conversation, so I think at this point everybody's sleeping already. Nobody's really paying attention. So let's just put it out in the, live webinar that, hey, look, everything you have developed as a software for the last 30 years, I can guarantee 99% of them will have to be redesigned, redeveloped, and redeployed for the AI machine learning purposes. And if you can challenge me on that, please do, because I need to have my bubbles bursted, right? Because because so far it hasn't, right? Because I believe any software that you have developed and there's a competition for that software and somebody else has the software that has AI machine learning built into it or has the capability of AI machine learning for all sorts of purposes, your software is going to get left behind. So any software that you have developed, including federal government and the state level governments, any software that you have developed, anything that you're utilizing right now will have to be redesigned and redeployed. There's no other way around it.
It's actually interesting you said that. Actually, just today I was talking to a fellow colleague of mine, and he was talking about ML DevOps or ML Ops,
right?
Which is kind of interesting to your point, right? Because it's the same thing. You, like you said, legacy systems are not going to last. I mean, if not already, out of the door, and whatever fuse there definitely have to revamp because you have to catch up with the pace of data ingestion and processing.
This new level of engagements that we're going to have, a lot of people fear that there will be a lot of job losses. Well, job losses will be real, but the job creation for specific purposes of AI machine learning is going to be as real as well. And those are going to be high-paying jobs, and those are going to be military-friendly jobs. Those are going to be veteran-friendly jobs. So if you're a military active duty, and if you're a military veteran trying to upskill or reskill, whatever the case is, get on it. Get on it like you're an E1 learning this stuff all over again with high curiosity, with high disciplines, right? You think you're an E6, you're an E7, you're slacking. No, go back to the E1 level. You got to get started on this. And I'm saying all this thinking that nobody's listening to this webinar at this point.
No, I mean, to your point, and it is interesting that you say that, right? Because like you said, there's also fast track programs. So again, it doesn't have to be that 4-year college degree. If you want to balance your life, you can still take these 6-month courses. They're all over the place. Coursera, Udemy, Fed VTE. If you're into the government space, right? There's a lot of opportunities to get that fast track certifications, just as well in information and cybersecurity. By the way, more to come on that topic.
Oh yeah, more to come on that topic, because me and Vivek, we're gonna start doing podcasts where we will cover security and security plus certification exam and cover that in detail, so that was entertaining for everybody listening in, right? So that way you're not just learning this topic on your own. You have people like us who went through the certification program. We want to be able to help you with some entertainment. You learn at the same time, right? And we break this down in a way that is digestible. But I think I want to point out one thing that it's demystifying, right? Let's demystify some things here. Because we talk about certifications, we look at the topic in a broad spectrum, thinking that all we do is security. Well, that doesn't necessarily have to be what the reason you're doing Security Plus or the reason you're doing AI/ML. You always have to find the passion that you're more in line with whatever that security or whatever that AI machine learning or whatever that data work is, right? So it could be that you are good at auditing, right? You're not necessarily somebody who would like to implement or integrate a device or integrate a MLOps or DevOps to your process. You don't care about a project, but you do really care about auditing that project, right? How do you sniff out and critique somebody else's work is your passion. That's what you got to do. You can become an auditor, but all things requires a pass for you to go through the gate, which is that, do you have the Security Plus certification? Do you have some AI/ML knowledge? Do you have some data knowledge? All these topics, and look, they could be overwhelming, just like we did right now in the ecosystem. We went through multiple topics, but they all have layers and layers of intricacies in them, right? Not necessarily that you have to know all of this and master them all. You just have to have the certification to go through the door to do things that you like to do. And I can tell you, auditing is very slim career path, right? Because if you're auditing at a broad level, you can capture a whole lot of clients. But if you're auditing for purposes of like AI machine learning, think about that. All the development that will happen in the coming years, you will have no shortages of work for the years to come, right? And you will have security plus certification that will help you. You have that CISSP done, that will help you, right? Everything you have done so far, that AI ML tweak, you just got to turn that into AI ML, uh, work, right? Instead of saying, I just do security. Well, I do security for MLOps. I do security for AI machine learning purposes. I do security and auditing for AI, MLOps project management, right? So I think that transition to AI machine learning is something that I'm very passionate about. So if you're thinking about reskilling and upskilling, reach out. Let me know. Let me know. I'll get you in touch with Vivek, and Vivek will get you in touch with somebody else. We're the type of guys that knows all the other guys.
No, it's a small world, right? To your point, and you're definitely in the right realm, right? Like you said, you're into security. I myself, AI and machine learning as well, right? So we both have that domain knowledge and in fact, a wide area of domains, right? To your point, and all that experience. But at the same time, like you were saying, this technology is going to keep changing, and those certifications, all they do is validate your knowledge and experience in the field. And you don't have to have you can still have your managerial certifications. That's why you have the CISSPs and the systems or the systems, because you don't have to be the guy, like you said, implementing the stuff, but you need to know how to ask the right questions and understand the jargon and have those conversations with the executives.
Absolutely. So this webinar, we do it every week. So be on the lookout for the next webinar, which is going to be with Robert Quinn. And Robert Quinn is going to come in and talk amazingly about the semiconductor chips, because that's all we're going to talk about is semiconductor chips in the next week's webinar. And we're looking forward to Vivek to come back and do a webinar specifically on security. Because some webinars we pick a wide topic just to get people's interest in the other topics. So far we have done property technology topics, we've done finance topic, we've done education, AI, machine learning topics, right? So every week we'll pick a topic. Today's topic was pretty broad, just to talk about that Ian Bremmer's TED Talk, which I highly encourage anybody listening, check it out, give it 15 minutes of your time. It's really worth listening what's coming down the pipeline with all the geopolitics and all the things that are happening around the globe and what's happening with algorithm, right? It's very important. So give this a try. Thanks for listening. Anybody who so far hasn't fallen asleep yet, and leave us a comment and let us know what you think about the episode. And looking forward to having you guys on the next one.
I was going to say, how can you fall asleep in such an interesting conversation between two enlightening people? But at the same time, Ian Bremmer's initiative, right? I think it's going to be called S pretty soon. But once again, thank you again on behalf of, I'll say for myself, I looking forward to presenting more of these on different topics.
Absolutely. Ciao.